Welcome to this episode of The People Dividend. I'm your host, Mike Horne, and I am absolutely delighted to have in our virtual studio today Dr. Nicole F. Roberts. Dr. Roberts describes herself as an author, founder, helper, and I really want to uncover this word, and as a fixer. So I want to find out a little bit about what that means. But uh, I'm excited again to have Nicole on for so many reasons, but in part because of one of her most recent projects, Generosity Wins, which is a story, it's a journey, it's a book that she co-authored into the transformative power of generosity. And it's really a captivating blend of fable and insights from her experiences from real life. And of course, like all books available at Amazon. And I hope everyone will be encouraged as a result. I think this will be of particular interest to everyone in our audience who's in human resources, who touches people. Because everybody brings an experience to an organization. And Dr. Roberts is certainly equipped to talk about that with her book, Generosity Wins. Let me just tell you a couple of the other amazing things that she's done before I have her introduce herself to you, to everyone listening today, to our new listeners, to our existing listeners. She's the executive director of something called Feed a Billion, which is just absolutely amazing about providing nutritious meals to girls in need. She's also the host of the Global Good podcast, and we certainly need more of that in our world. Co-founder and host of the Super Bowl Brain Health Summit, founder of Health and Human Rights Strategies. And on top of that, finished a master's in public policy at the University of Chicago, finished a doctorate of public health at the University of North Carolina at UNC Chapel Hill, and in her spare time is a volunteer, working on an organizing coalition of virus information distribution. So, Nicole Roberts, Dr. Nicole F. Roberts, lots of ways to find her, but Nicole, welcome to the People Dividend. Why don't you tell our audience just a little bit about yourself?
Wow. I mean, I just listened about myself, and it's amazing. It's like I've said before, it's like the Instagram of your life, because, you said some lovely things, but I'm like in there, oh, this happened and that happened. And that like life happens and all these little highlights just get read, and what? Yeah, it's like the Instagram version. That's nice.
Right. Oh, that's cool.
I like it. So I'm a doctor of public health. My background's in neuroscience, and so I obsess and love to obsess over how and why people behave the way they do and how we can use that. And so I thought, you mentioned I have a master's in public policy. A long time ago, I really thought I would end up in government and I was going to change systems. And then I moved to DC, where I live, and I've been here for a long time. And I realized it's not that easy. And we design so many things around what we want to happen or should happen. And a lot of times people forget that we're just going to human. That's who we are. That's what we do. We can't help it. We've really not changed that much ever. And so I think for me, it's really about the pivot in my career came early, and I just started doing work that I, believed in, and thought, how do we meet people where they are? Not where we want them to be, where they should be, what would be the most responsible place, but where they really are. And so I've had the great fortune of working mostly in nonprofit spaces and doing lots of work around helping people. And that always, I think, makes you feel good. And then I had the great fortune of being introduced to, and we'll talk about generosity, but literally I think the most generous person I've ever met, Monty Wood. And he had this idea for a book, and he is this business leader guru. Really, I know from both working with him and from the mentorship side as I went through some changes in my professional career. And Monty's been so successful over his career, and he, upon reflecting, realized that so much of his success came from being generous, truly generous, giving without expectation of return to his employees, his colleagues, his clients. And when you do that, people work harder. They believe in you, they believe in the mission, and they know that you genuinely care. It's not some transactional thing. And so he had this premise that he wanted to write a book about generosity. It went through some ideation iterations, and he realized that he wanted to put some science behind it and think about how people behave and why. And we got connected, and it's just been this incredible journey of bringing the science and the business together as to why, in our title, Generosity Wins, how and why this game-changing superpower drives our success. That word superpower matters because we are the only species on Earth that is truly generous. It's what keeps our civilizations going. It's what keeps humans here. And so once we realized what we were onto, it became this fun, informative journey.
It's interesting. You have a challenge that's built along with Generosity Wins, a 30-day challenge. That can you tell us a little bit about that 30-day challenge?
Sure. It's very simple because generosity is simple. There are limitless ways to be generous. So a lot of people think, especially here in the U.S., when one looks up the word generosity, you find a lot of information on how to donate, how to give a donor dollar, right? It's philanthropy based, it's money based. And in fact, that's not what generosity really is. We all know it could be a smile at the right time. That could be the most generous thing you do for someone that day, and it changes their world and how they're feeling. And so we decided to change the definition of generosity. And so we made it really simple, but it's any act of kindness or support given with no expectation of exchange or return from the recipient. So there really are limitless ways to be generous. So saying that, our point is also that it's simple. It could be a smile. It doesn't take some grand act. It doesn't take some huge change in your life daily. But what it takes is intention and thinking. And so reflection is probably a better word. And so what we challenge people to do, because we all know it takes at least a couple weeks, if not a couple months, to really change the neural pathways in our brain, is a 30-day challenge in which every day, at the end of the day, you write down one thing you did for someone else that was generous and one thing you did for yourself. And if you want extra credit, how it made you feel. But what we have found is that in 30 days, by doing that, small acts in particular of generosity become part of your nature. It becomes so easy and it just becomes something that you do. But I think one of the keys there to point out is that it's about others and yourself. It's, we're not saying give, just constant. You have to take care of yourself. And what you do for yourself, it could also be a small act, but something that you do just to help refuel yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, socially, whatever it is that you need.
That's great. I mean, and you described it, if I heard it correctly, as acts of kindness or an act of kindness, generosity being an act of kindness and support given in return. I've been working a lot with the concept of kindness for my upcoming book that by the same title as the podcast, The People Dividend, hopefully out in October of this year. And because we're back from the editor and all that, so we're hopefully ready to go into a lot of the production elements of The People Dividend. It's about leadership, though. But in this book, I write a lot about kindness. And I hadn't considered this topic of generosity and how it's related. And I wonder if you could say some more about that.
Sure. Well, even today, I was having a conversation, and what I was explaining was I was doing something for someone. And I said, oh, that's nice. And he said, it is nice, but it's a lot more than that. I said, by making the first move in being generous and doing this specific thing, I said, what I'm doing and what I'm really showing is I can be trusted. I heard you. I understand the issue. And I'm doing something for you because you can trust me with the information that you shared with me. And I'm doing this not because I have to, but because I think this will help. And that's all I care about. Once I do it, I don't expect anything from you. I heard you and I think I can help you. So here, what trust does is build relationships. And so I've talked to people in the past who are like, well, I'm very sales focused. And I said, it's no reason not to think of yourself as truly generous. If you're meeting a need that someone has, whatever it is you're trying to sell them, if you're truly doing it from a place where you're authentically trying to help them meet their need, make their life easier, better, healthier, happier, whatever it is, then that's a generous act. And if you think of it through that lens, as opposed to I'm selling this, I have to do this thing, like it really changes your perspective. And we have pretty good, sometimes we're wrong, but we have pretty good BS meters. And so when someone does something and it's transactional in nature, when they're trying to sell you something, or they're like, I'll do this for you, but it's very clear there's an expectation, right? I want this thing in return, or in the future, you're going to owe me. Or we pick up on that naturally. And we know that it's not being given in that same true, generous nature. But when we give truly generously, people know, and it immediately helps put their guard down. It lets them know that you're looking out for them, you're hearing them, you're understanding where they're coming from. And we have trust. And then we have a relationship that gets built on a solid foundation of trust.
And yeah, so I would imagine there is this relationship between generosity and trust. In my earlier book, Integrity by Design, Working and Living Authentically, I talk a lot about the concept of trust and how foundational it is to managing and leading and getting people to bring their best every day. Again, it's another thing that I hadn't considered, its relationship to generosity, which really almost underpins or underlies these powerful human connections. Or if it doesn't underlie it, it seems that it has the power to lift them exponentially. So thinking about this, I mean, in terms of the business world, how's that? How does that work? Generosity.
Well, I mean, I even said earlier, in our book, we have multiple people who talk about the ROI of generosity. And some of the very tangible examples of, by doing this, I got this back. And it doesn't always look like a very specific, I gave this and this very specific thing came back to me and I went, check, right? That's what I got for my generous act. But it does always come back. And people told these incredible stories about whether they called it karma or ROI, or everyone used different synonyms for that. When you give, it does come back to you. It creates this karmic effect. And one of the things in the business world that we found that generous leaders do is not only care, truly care about the people that work with them, but they mentor. And the stories we heard about mentorship, I mean, the one thing we cannot get back is time. You can earn another dollar and replace it, right? We cannot get our time back. And so for leaders to take their wisdom, their knowledge, their passion, their purpose, and to share that with others, it changes the way people view you, the way they respect you, interact with you, work for you. And I mean, people buy into mission. They really do, whether it's your personal mission, your corporate mission, whatever it is. And people who really, and you know this in the book, people who believe in the mission of where they are will always work harder. because they are tied to the work that they're doing. It's not just a paycheck.
And I have to imagine that generosity is a renewable resource. It's not something that is finite, that has a defined duration. Um, so, if it is a renewable resource and it has an extensive shelf life, then how do people renew their sources of generosity and keep that in mind? I mean, are there certain pathways or um, certain events that contribute to a generous spirit?
I'll answer that a couple different ways. The first being, um, you're right. I've not heard anyone else say it that way. It is renewable because we don't run out of ways to give. We don't run out of ways to just be nice to people. Sometimes it's just a little patience, right? That could be the most generous thing you do is give someone a little bit of grace. I have a baby, and I can tell you that sometimes people just giving me a little extra time, it's the most generous thing they could have done for me, because I'm working, I'm caring for a baby, I'm doing all these things at once, and that's all I need, right? It's just a little patience with me. So it is renewable. I absolutely love that. And the second is, I would actually say it goes above and beyond that. It's not just renewable, it actually improves our ability to continue to give each time we give. And the reason I would make that argument is, what happens when we're generous neurologically, it improves so many things in our brains and in our bodies. It improves our cognitive function, our empathy, our emotional well-being, right, our ability to connect to those around us. It actually improves our memory, and our emotional regulation. By doing kind things for others, by being generous, we activate these pleasure centers in our brain, these feel-good hormones, dopamine, oxytocin, and it reduces our stress, our anxiety. And so, right, what starts up here in your brain cascades all the way through your body. And so not only in the moment are we doing something for someone else who immediately receives the benefit, even if it's unknown to us, our brain and body are benefiting from what we're doing. And then I would even say a third element is around us. What we found, and there's plenty of studies that support this, is that when people see a generous act, they are more inclined to do something generous. And so you get three immediate wins right there, right? Physical to yourself, physical and mental, emotional, and then to other people and then to those around you. So it not only is replaceable, constantly renewable, I would say we're actually elevating ourselves.
And I'd encourage everyone, and this will be in the show notes, to visit generositywins.us for more about this particular topic. But what I'm curious about, Nicole, is, I mean, what took you from public health to this particular topic? I mean, I can see a relation, but I can also see a stretch.
Well, I think anyone who works in public health would pose the question, is there anything more generous than public health? I mean, the way we approach the world, or I certainly do, and my peers and my cohorts I went to school with and work with, we're constantly thinking about how everything we do, see, feel, touch affects who we are. I mean, one thing that people often think is a stretch when I say, like, transportation. Transportation is absolutely public health. The person who has to take 3 buses with children to get to a hospital if someone's sick just lost an entire workday. 3 buses there, multiple children, 3 buses home, plus a doctor's appointment. They say follow up tomorrow or in a couple days. The person with those resources is living a very different life and experience than the person who drives and pays, $70 to park in the garage at the hospital and get their treatment. And we are all constantly interacting with everything around us in a different way. whether it's the way we get there, it could be walking, right? Some of us walk. I live in a city downtown. We walk everywhere. Other people drive for hours. I know people who, to get into the city, have 2.5 hour commutes each direction. That means they miss family time, bath time, dinners. They don't have breakfast with their families, right? So everything we do and experience, our jobs, the people around us, the air we breathe, what we hear, what we see, it is public health. It changes who we are. It changes how we feel. It changes literally, the makeup of our health. And so for those of us who are always thinking about how does this affect us? How does this change us? To me, this is a natural component of that. And we're always looking for ways. I mean, just go to any bookstore. You mentioned Amazon earlier, or you can buy from generositywins.us and get a discount. And we directly ship you the book as opposed to the big retailer. But in the end, right, you can go to any bookstore and the self-help section is huge. All these ways, these hacks, right? Everybody is looking for something to make this better, that better, this feel better, look better. And so we were shocked when looking at research, and especially like the Harvard happiness study, right? It's almost 90 years old. We have almost 100 years of data on people. And there's no specific hack out there except being good to other people and being good to yourself. Like, that's the hack. It's really simple. Every religious context and book and philosopher in history have talked about doing for others and doing for yourself in some form or iteration. And, people who are generous really do live longer, healthier, happier. Their marriages last longer. And what we're finding is over their careers, they actually earn more.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of congruence. When words match actions, and when they align with thoughts, even better, it creates a kind of congruence, right? And it creates a certain happiness. And I think, to your point, what we do know is that, people like to be around other happy people, and not the kind of happy like I just got a new boyfriend or a new girlfriend, but that kind of sustained happiness.
There's a chapter in our book, and it's the interview that actually, and I'm not over exaggerating when I say changed my life. So a key component of the book that I should point out that we didn't talk about.
I wanted to go there next. These interviews, right, which are just fascinating. So right on target. Perfect.
Yeah. So our book is written as a fable. And so our main character is made up, but she is
Emily. Emily does all this interviewing.
I have come to think of Emily as a dear friend, but Emily is in this place in her career, and she goes into, I won't give it away, but she goes into this sort of interview, catch up, review, and she thinks she's killing it, and she's, look at the numbers. And her boss essentially says, but you failed at generosity, and it's a hospitality business that they're in. And he says the numbers are one thing, but we are known for living generously, and we are generous with our customers. And he gives her examples of how the bottom line undermined their spirit of generosity. And so he sends her on this little adventure that I would love to go on myself. And I actually kind of got to go on it, but where she interviews 12 people who are truly generous, remarkably generous. And they're all real people. And to me, that's what makes the book so special, is at the end of each chapter, we actually added a QR code so you can hover over it and it takes you to that person's LinkedIn page. You can literally connect to all of our interviews. And in the end, right, she learns a lot of lessons, and she learns what true generosity is and how it impacts you in every way, and how all these people came to be generous in very, very different ways, and how they practice it in their lives. But to then take the step back, we set out on this journey of our own to talk about business and to talk about science and all of these things. But we were just as surprised by the outcomes of the book and the interviews. And in one of those interviews, I think I cried twice. And it's a guy named Andy Hill. And Andy is remarkable. It's what he just said. What Andy spoke about is his journey in coming to what he calls his okayness. And it's not happiness in this way of like, he's just the most chipper person you've ever met in your life, super cheesy, although he is very happy. But his okayness, he reached a place where things could go wrong. There could be a job loss. There could be a this or a that. But because he was okay with himself and who he was as a person, everything else is going to be okay. We'll figure it out. And his partner lives in that same place. And to hear someone really talk about okayness, and once you reach that place, some people may call it contentment or something, but it's like this spirit just sort of comes out of you that I am comfortable with who I am. And then all of a sudden you can step into situations more authentically, more openly, because you're okay. And you're assured of your okayness, no matter what happens around you. The way he describes it, I highly recommend this chapter. The way he describes it, just, it opened my eyes in these new ways that I think, particularly for me, writing this book and becoming a mother at the same time, I realized so much of what I had previously associated with myself and my identity were just fine, right? They're great. But I was in a new place, and there were things I had to say no to from now on. There are things I had to put to the side because I just didn't have the time. My priorities changed. And it's that chapter in particular really spoke to me because I realized I was stepping into a new life, and I'll never go back. I'll never not be Liam's mom again. And I'm okay with where I am. There are things I have to say no to. There are opportunities I will miss. There are roles and jobs that I could have otherwise taken, but I can't now. And I'm okay with that because I'm okay with where I am, and I'm in my place. And as you were saying, that sort of, again, we've used the word spirit, but whatever it is, right, that when you step into a room in your okayness, people want to be around that. They want to experience that kind of happiness and joy, and not in a cheesy way, in a real content, we're good way. It's truly remarkable.
Yeah, it's amazing to look at the profiles of the people that are featured in Generosity Wins, and to Emily in the stable really makes these people come alive, and to the point where I think it evokes emotion, as you described as well. And it doesn't seem that I can have a conversation today without talking about technology. Most of the conversations are about generative AI. Um, but one of the statements I think that you make in the book, or came through, is that technology is accelerating the way that we can be generous with each other. Can you say something about that and how that, because, I don't think we often conceive of technology and generosity in the same breath.
So I will not do it nearly as eloquently as the person, Andre, that we actually interviewed, the very last chapter, chapter 12 of the book. We chose a tech giant, if you will, Andre Grund, for a specific reason. And it's because of that question, which is, okay, we can talk about how human connectedness is good for us, but what happens when all of a sudden, especially looking at mental health, all of a sudden we are separate, right? We're doing so much virtually, and we're remote work, and we're distant. And we've got social media, and we're just now starting to sort of understand what social media is doing, particularly young people and young brains. And one of the things he said is, and again, I'm not going to say this eloquently, but I thought it just really was so insightful, is that technology is accelerating what we know about each other. And it's accelerating generosity and karma. And he said, in in the past, someone could be mischievous, they could be unkind, they could be untruthful, and they pack up and they move to a new city, right? Nobody's the wiser, and they can start their little hustle and scam or whatever it is they do, right? Their unkindness all over again. We are now in a space where your true colors shine through pretty quickly. And throughout these mediums that we have, especially social media, who you are, even if it takes a little bit, it comes through. People see the real you. And even if it's calling and getting a reference, we're looking at a LinkedIn and seeing someone's work history. You can much more quickly now know whether someone is the kind of person who lives with the spirit of generosity or isn't. And just the ability of technology for karma and your behavior and your actions to catch up to you, good or bad, right? Or indifferent. You may just be getting by. And so for people who are truly generous, that we now have new mediums to connect. We have new mediums to share. We have new ways to educate. But we also have new ways, very quick ways, in which we can know who someone truly is and find our like people. And if you're not someone who's just innately truly generous, you can work to be that way because people will know and you can change what's out there. But yeah, technology, it's opened a lot of doors for connectedness in different ways and for that transparency, I guess I would say, in terms of who we really are.
It's amazing. And again, it's such a wonderful expression of how you have defined generosity. This any act of kindness or support given with no expectation of exchange or return from the recipient. And there are limitless, meaningful ways to be generous. I think that even just reading the first chapter of Generosity Wins, you can gain so much insight into what Emily begins to learn on this journey. And it's really just an amazing story in so many ways. But I'd also like to talk in the time that we have remaining about the Global Good podcast and what you do with that and how people can find it and where they can find it.
Thank you for asking. So, admittedly, the Global Good podcast has been on a bit of a pause, but we're coming back. So I'm really glad you asked.
Good time to catch up on past episodes,
right? Yeah, I already said I had a baby, and I thought I could do it all. I couldn't. Nope, I couldn't. And one of the things, like I wish it were the only thing, but one of the things that fell to the side during that time is the podcast. The amount of research I had to do because of its premise, which I'll quickly explain, I literally just couldn't do it all. Not with the same level of thoughtfulness, and to me, without that, it's not the same. So over my career, I've worked probably close to 50 countries at this point, if not more. And you earlier alluded to, I put fixer in whatever it was that you read.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I like to fix. I like to help fix. And when there's, say, anything big from an earthquake to just everyday food insecurity, how do we help fix these systems, right? Because again, it's public health. How do we fix these systems to ensure that people after a disaster have access to clean water, shelter, clothing, the things they need to be safe? How do we ensure that girls in particular have access to nourishment, to food? And so I like to help work with people, public-private partner. I wrote my dissertation on how to build public-private partnerships. And so, how do we build these systems that help people fix the problems that are in front of them? And what that led to is when I had to stop traveling so much, the pandemic started. was actually my husband who said, you should start a podcast about all these people you work with around the world and what they're doing. And in my mind, everybody had a podcast. There was no need for a podcast. Podcast was silly. No offense. And then I think I came back like 6 months later into the pandemic and I said, maybe we should tell these stories in a podcast. He was like, yeah, right. Catch up. And so we started a podcast in which every couple of weeks I would sit down with someone that I had worked with, or a topic that I just was absolutely blown away by, that I thought people would want to know about and how to make a difference. And so my goal with the podcast, though, is there's the audio, right? There's the listening experience, but I wanted it to be an active experience. And so what we do is at the end of each episode or on the website, there are 5 calls to action. And it could be that one of them is like, read more in this National Geographic article. Others are like, you can actually build one of these in your own community, or you can donate here, or you can do this at your local whatever, right? Fill in the blank. And so, we have looked at all kinds of issues ranging from food insecurity to human trafficking, vision. Vision was one that I've gotten a ton of feedback on. People don't really think of the fact that, particularly as we age and in low-income countries, access to vision care is so little. After the genocide in Rwanda, there was one hospital that did vision care. And now, because of this organization, they're all over the country and people can get glasses. But I mean, just imagine if you're a child trying to learn and you can't see, or if you're trying to work and you don't have access to glasses and you can't see what you're doing. I mean, it really completely takes away your ability to earn a living. And so these episodes look at just remarkable people all over the world who are actually making a difference. But the way I generally say it is they're too busy doing the work to get attention or press, or honestly, most don't even care about it. They're just too busy trying to solve the problem in their community or their country. And so I just thought, I'm not super creative. So I said, well, it's global good. So we just called it the Global Good Podcast.
That's so good.
It's all about people doing good in the world.
I love your example with eye care. I've had the good fortune to travel a lot of the world. You mentioned 50 countries. And part of it started from my, early experience as a Peace Corps volunteer in what was described as part of the fourth world in the Solomon Islands, where, you're out on this little speck of dirt in the middle of the giant Pacific, and talk about access to healthcare. Yeah, not so much, right? And with eye care, certainly.
I knew people, because I met them, working in the Himalayas in Nepal. I knew people who walked, not making sense, they walked more than 9 hours just to get to a clinic that we opened. And that doesn't count the walk home, right? And this was during the wet season. So they arrived with cuts that had already gotten infected because of what they had to go through just walking to get to the clinic. I mean, that's a full 18 hours round trip, more than, plus waiting. They hadn't had access to a clinic in years, and it took us days to get there to work. But the power of being able to treat people and to even admittedly just give out soap, clean water and soap, it goes so far. And setting up systems, like I said, post any kind of event, earthquake, Haiti comes to mind in particular, the infrastructure it takes to try and get systems up and running. And when you live on an island, a lot of people don't think about it. When you live on an island, you don't have clean water. You are surrounded by salt water, not fresh water. It has to be made. It has to be shipped in. It doesn't just appear. It has to happen, and it has to be intentional. And whether it involves a barge bringing it in or equipment in real time, it takes significant resources to have clean water, which we have to have to survive. So those sorts of things take a lot of logistics and organization and a lot of partnerships and truly, truly generous people.
And generosity, I mean, that
Yeah.
really brings us back full circle, the
Yeah.
topic about generosity and generous acts. And
Yeah. And it could be, to your point about technology, I mean, it could be the technology. We know that our military can send soldiers into very remote places and they can produce clean water. That technology can be deployed and employed in every low income country and corner of the world. And same with food, right? We actually have an abundance. If we did things the right way, we could get the right resources to the right people. And so I think, whether it's taking your intellectual property and sharing it so that people have access to things they need, whether it's, again, in this case, even donating, volunteering your time, donating to the local food pantry, mentoring, if you have a skill set, mentoring other people, thinking about how to take your skills and put them out in the world in different ways that are not just the company you work for. Or be your own chief generosity officer in your company. Say, how is it that our company can be more generous with its employees, with its client, and with the community that it's in? If your company is in 4 cities, what can you do in those cities? Not only will it really embed you and endear you to the neighborhood that you're in, the city that you're in, but it builds these relationships. How do we as people, communities, families, organizations, whatever, how do we be more generous with those around us?
it's a great way to begin to wrap up. And I'll ask you just one more question before we wrap up and conclude today's episode with Nicole F. Roberts, co-author of Generosity Wins, which you can find at generositywins.us. You can listen to the Global Good podcast. You'll find all of this in the show notes. All of our listeners know about the show notes. And for those who are new to listening, check out the show notes for all the links, the ways to get in touch with Nicole Roberts, and also on LinkedIn, I'm sure. So, Nicole, if you were to, here we are, we're really, for a lot of my business listeners, we're about ready to start the second half of the year. As you think about it, what advice or guidance, or what would be the one piece of counsel that you would give to people about what they could accomplish with generosity in the second half of the year, or how they might start, what the first step is that they might take?
I think it's a great question. I think looking at what small acts can you do internally right now. So one of my favorite parts about the book now being out is that we get emails. The emails contain examples of someone saying, I did this thing happened, right? And then I get to read it and go, yay, that's awesome. Or more than once, I've had tears going, that's so incredible. And, one person that really touched me, especially from a healthcare background, was someone in leadership at a hospital. And his example was he set out every day to thank a different person on the maintenance staff. And to truly thank them, not just say, hey, thanks for your work. But one of the examples he gave was, he said, there's a woman who always cleans the atrium windows. And so the day that he thanked her, he gave specific examples, right? And he said, I'm so-and-so, I've never met you. She introduced herself, and he said, thank you for what you do. People who come to the hospital are often scared, right? They're tense. And any number of things, right? Whether they're from themselves or a family member. And he said, you keep this space beautiful, and you make this a warm and welcoming place. And in fact, you are often the first face that people see. And the work you do is the first thing they experience when they come here. And it makes a difference to people's experience in this hospital. And we really couldn't run this hospital the way we do without you, even though I'm kind of choked up. And he's like, he said this woman had said to him, no one had ever spoken to her before in her work. And he went out of his way then to do it to someone different every single day until he felt like he had actually touched intentionally with a conversation in a specific way that they make that environment better. And he said, even the cafeteria area, all of a sudden he started noticing, so he encouraged his other staff to do it too, when he started seeing the impact it was having and the words that people were giving back to him saying, no one has ever done this, or I've never experienced this. And so he challenged other people to do it too. And he said, what he started noticing is that in the food area, people were starting to commingle and people were sitting and talking. And so normally where you'd see 2 or 3 of these over here and a couple of these over here, they were sitting together because something in that one-on-one exchange had sparked of, oh, you have a, oh, I'm from there. And people started really talking to each other. People who pass each other every single day and had never spoken and never recognized the work that the other one was doing. I give that example to say, if you have 6 months, and when this comes out, we'll be a little passive, but you've got 5 or 6 months left. I would truly take stock of who's around you. How do you interact with them? What do you really know about them? What, as we hear, like everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about, right? What is something, and it can be a small thank you, it can be a handwritten note, right? It can be a smile, it can be whatever it is that you choose. What is something that you can do to show people in your organization that you really care about them? Not the work they're doing and the deliverable and what you get out of it, but you actually care about them. I think anyone who does that is going to see results. And I can't even say what they are. I can't say if you do this, you're going to see this at the end. It's kind of an experiment, a really fun experiment about getting to, it could just be better relationships. Right? There could be someone who was about to leave. You may have high turnover. And because someone got a thank you, they decided to stay. They were heard, they were seen, they were recognized. So they're not going to leave. And you can't measure what didn't happen. But at the end of the year, I think you'll see really tangible results by being intentionally generous every day with someone.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nicole Roberts. It's been great to have you as a guest on the People Dividend. I encourage everyone to pick up Generosity Wins. I think it's one of these concepts that can have a life-altering effect, a life-changing effect. I've certainly learned a lot in this conversation. I feel that I have a new framework. I feel energized about using my capacity and my capability to be generous with others and to see how that forges trust in relationships and ultimately the building blocks of a great team and organization. One of my earliest mentors, when he was asked to summarize his life before he died in 6 words, gave this statement: he was a social psychologist. I fix people, teams, and organizations. So I love this concept of being a fixer, Nicole, that you put to yourself. And beyond that, love the great work that you're doing with generosity and what you're bringing to the world in that regard. So once again, thank you so much for being a guest on the People Dividend.
Thank you.
And until the next episode of the People Dividend, everyone, please stay well.